one of the first things, we talked a little bit about the old James Brown records where he was playing the organ. Not many of our people know that James Brown and Aretha Franklin, I might add, started out as organ and piano players before all else. And they were great. As great at playing those instruments as they were in using the drum and the voice, were the gifts of the African musical gods. The African musical gods. I won't say that they've been corrupted by regular beats, programmed music, and the rest, but it is a gift of the African gods. And the other thing I'd just like to bring up briefly before I forget, some of you may have seen Nelson Mandela's funeral, and when he was buried in his hometown, they showed people from the village and the country of South Africa marching over the hills to his burial site. And some people ask, well, why did they march in unison and why were they barefooted? Well, that's because Africans, first of all, dominate the ground. The ground is sacred to us. Dancing is sacred to us on the ground. And the first examples that we've had in the village of people clearing space for celebration was when Africans danced in order to honor the warriors who had gone out to fight and protect the village. And it's that spirit that I'd like to bring today to the Naisha residents, who, to my knowledge, occupy the only true African villages that exist here in New York City, and therefore have a special obligation as well as a very special privilege of maintaining African traditions.
You're listening to the East Harlem Community Radio Network, and this is the Pro-Pyramid Chronicles with the Professor Dr. Heyward B. Dotson. The B stands for bad. Sorry.
Well, it used to be Heyward T. Dotson, and the T stood for Tom, so we're making progress.
Okay, and he's also, remember, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are listening, he is a Rhodes Scholar. Some think he's a Rogue Scholar, but he's a Rhodes Scholar. He's a Columbia graduate, NBA draft choice, and I believe he also was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, if I'm not mistaken. So Dave Winfield, eat your heart out, New York. New York's very own, Staten Island's very own. And last week, for those of you who are listening at the through the many sites and in Naisha location, some of the affordable housing that the network carries itself for, I thought we talked a little bit about issues in sports and our departed good 50-year friend Zach C. Husser, who was one of the founders of the show. So I thought maybe we should, just kind of like honorarily, just call it Issues of Sports for today, if you didn't mind, and if you didn't mind still. Mm-hmm. All right, so, even though he still has the Issues of Sports thing, I think that would kind of cover some of the things that we might want to talk about today, just picking from those two big topics, since we have a professional producer here with us. And so those of you who are listening to us over the East Harlem Community Network, which was, actually, this is the East Harlem Community Network, and we're here with Professor Dotson. We're at the Pro-Pyramid Studios here at the Riverside Knock. If you remember, everyone remember that. The infamous Riverside Knock, and the Knock stands for the Network Operations Center. And we're here with our leader, our commander, Professor Dotson. And my name is Mr. Dougie, the Button Pusher. We're here with producer Mr. Stu A. Reed, and the A stands for excellent.
Thank you, Doug.
Student thing.
I'd like you to take a look at an item that I brought in today to give you a quick look at. I hope all of you will be able to go to your libraries and ask to see the record album produced by one of Africa's greatest heroes.
Now, for
Marcus
our
Garvey.
audio listeners, the people who are going to be listening to this on our podcast, you're holding up a what?
This is an album put out about Marcus Garvey, and it's entitled Up You Mighty Race.
What picture is that on the
It was
front?
put out in 1932, and on the front you see Marcus Garvey in his splendor. I believe this is before he was sent to the Atlanta prison for a few years. But
he's black. Obviously, he's black.
well,
For those of
he's
you who
black,
can't
but
see.
obviously he tried to help his people. That's why he was sent to prison at that time. Marcus Garvey, for those of you who don't remember, some of you are still old enough to remember. You might be 110 now, but you remember. And those of you who have yet to learn about him, Marcus Garvey brought the message of African race identity to the entire world at a time when no one, particularly here in the United States, believed there was such a thing, and that if there was any important reason for knowing about it or the people's history. Marcus Garvey, Up You Mighty Race record album. The second item here, hopefully later on in some future shows we might be able to play certain excerpts from the record album. The other item I brought here is a picture of a man. Those of you who have studied African or American African history will recognize him right off. This is the famed Dr. Ben Jockman. And he is an expert on our history, both in Africa and here. He, along with John Henry Clark, whose institute you can visit on Convent Avenue between 141st Street and 142nd Street, were prime movers in 1970 through 1975 in, for the first time, bringing the story of African Americans to the general American public. And that meant also bringing it to African American students and citizens. He did a tremendous public service in addition to being a tremendous scholar. At that time he was up at Cornell University, and subsequently he's now located right here in the great community of Harlem. He's about 90 years old now and is still active in promulgating his viewpoints on why Africa is the mother of all civilization in the world. Africa is the mother of all civilizations in the world. Those of you who are impressed with Northern Europeans or Russians or Japanese or South Americans or Alaskans understand those areas were initially peopled by Africans from Africa. And if you go back to places like Japan and China now, for instance, the China that we know is named after the Qin dynasty. And the Qin dynasty was an original black skin dynasty in China. Japan is, the southern part of Japan is almost entirely black skinned. you wouldn't know it from the way it's depicted today. Just as in South and Latin America, many of the early travelers to those continents were indeed black-skinned people. Black-skinned people. And we're just now, thanks to efforts of people like John Henry Clark and Dr. Ben, we have started in the last 15 to 20 years to honor the anthropological evidence, the geographic and geological evidence to support what was only theories. Theories when Dr. Ben and John Henry Clark started their pioneering efforts in the 1970s. Oh well, before, but they became popular after the 1970s, after the black student demonstrations, after Vietnam, after you had this new generation of people who were impacted by the civil rights movement in 1950s. So that's John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Jochannan, and Marcus Garvey, 3 black men who were giants. And next week, I hope to bring you the items from 2 black women who were equal giants in this parade toward our citizenship status in this country. And that's what this is all about. Having people in NYCHA housing, having people and voters in New York being treated as citizens, not first-class citizens, not second-class citizens, not third, but citizens entitled to everything, every protection, every chance for success that this country has to offer. We as a group, unlike perhaps some immigrant groups and some Latino groups, have paid for our citizenship by free labor. Now we have a situation where we're simply asking that as citizens we be given the type of housing, the type of employment, and the type of technological advancement that is our birthright as citizens. It's a huge psychological gap. It's something that perhaps only our grandchildren will really start to get a handle on. But in part, it all started with Marcus Garvey, Du Bois to a degree, W.B. Du Bois, and certainly in recent times, John Henry Clark and Dr. Ben. Now, on to this week's topics.
Well, this week I thought that it would be a good idea if we brought in one of our old buddies. And on the line we have Mr. Miguel Jorge, better known as Michael George, reporting in from Los Angeles, California. Mr. Jorge, how you doing, man? Hello, Mike.
Well, once again, you see that technically...
Oh, we got him. Hey, Mike? Okay, once again, ladies and gentlemen, we have Miguel Jorge, better known as a.k.a. Michael George, from Los Angeles, California, by way of Bronx High School of Science and the New York Post. Screenwriter extraordinaire. What say you, Michael George?
I say hobby-gobby to everybody.
Hey, Mike, I'm glad you're here because I just wanted you to explain something, because we have our crack producer here, Stuart A. Reed, and of course the voice of clarity is here with us, and today we're calling the show Issues in Sports, this is our podcast, and we're broadcasting live over the East Harlem Community Radio Network throughout multiple housing authority locations and some affordable housing locations as well, which will be available on our website at ehcr.online. That's one word. Michael, can you just explain what the word woosah means, please?
Woosah? Well, it depends on who's saying it and where you're saying it.
I said it, and I said it, and...
Tell us what a Bronx High School of Science guy means by it.
I don't know if there's any real definition of the word.
Well, we at Stuyvesant.
Equivocate 1 minute.
Well, it's no different than being from different housing projects. And you play for your basketball team, or you plant a garden in front of your development. You wanted to kind of represent you. And we've been very fortunate because not only have we had Michael George and Bronx High School of Science represented, which is always a good thing for most people, but we've had them on shows with Stuyvesant people. And as a result, the takeoff, the discussion has been tremendous. So I'm glad to hear his voice from 3,000 miles away, and I know it's going to be just as dynamic as it was 8 years ago.
Hey, Mike, let's get right to it. What about the fire, baby?
Oh man, listen, I was trying to explain, and I sometimes talk to people quite often talk to people on the East Coast, and they don't understand, and trying to give them a perspective on these fires. Manhattan is 15,500 acres. So when you hear about a fire that's 60,000, 100,000 acres, if you can only imagine Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens on fire. That's how big the fires are. But the fires are devastating. I mean, really, I've been in a lot of those areas where they've had major fires, and they're beautiful, but they have periods, 20 years sometimes, where there's no substantial rain. So you get a little spark, and everything goes up. And the fires up north, what they call the campfire, was really bad because the whole town burned down, a town called Paradise.
Now, Mike, with that campfire, there's been some rumor on TV that President Trump or the public officials did not react as swiftly and as completely as they would to the devastation of the fire because many of the residents were Latino Californians or immigrants or simply not the old style Californians who had been having these types of fires. Do you think there was anything to that?
No, not much. I mean, again, Paradise is a small working town. It's not a matter of it being a lot of Latinos or anything. And I don't think I really don't think the response, because of the response to the fire, such a large area, not enough firemen. They always bring in firemen from other states and stuff because they don't have enough resources. I don't know if it's a matter of them not wanting to put out the fires. I don't think fire has a race or ethnicity or anything. When your house is burning down, it's burning down.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Mike, I saw, what caught my attention was I saw, on League Pass, an NBA game between Sacramento and, I want to say, L.A. Huh? Well, this particular game wasn't canceled, but what caught my attention was when they was doing the pregame show in the arena. I was looking at the arena, I was going like, I thought it was the 60s because I was like, why is all that fucking smoke in the arena? You know what I mean? Because, remember back in the 60s, people, I went to a game in the Garden, and, everybody smoking cigarettes, right. And, it was really a smoky place.
That's right.
And I turned on the TV the other night, and I'm looking at the Sacramento game, and it was smoky in there, Jack. And finally the guy started saying, you might have noticed the smoke in here. And he was talking about it was because of the fire. And so what I'm saying to you is that the order of magnitude, I don't think people get it about the fire, and particularly the president. I know he don't get it because he said that they should just brush their leaves off the ground and everything would have been okay.
Right.
Well, apparently he didn't go to Bronx High School of Science, that's for sure.
Well, apparently you've never been to Finland either, because that's their way of keeping fires and forests and stuff under control by people raking their yards. The same thing. Listen, I mean, for all intents and purposes, what he was saying was not necessarily true, but the reality is that there's ways to prevent your house from burning down. I mean, there's certain things.
Yeah, I know the best way if you have a houseboat and you live in the ocean. And your house ain't gonna burn down.
It's not gonna burn. I mean,
yeah, you might drown.
I got a lot of calls from people asking me was I in the line of fire, and the reality reality is no. I don't live in an area where there's a lot of forests and open land and brush and that kind of thing.
Now you're getting to the reason I think why there is these particular fires, because there's been fires in California forever, and it has something to do with the weather pattern. As far as I can tell, I didn't go to Bronx High School of Science and Stuyvesant, but the weather pattern and the fact that there's an urban encroachment. I mean, how does that square with your Bronx High School of Science in this training, Michael George?
Well, that squares very well with my training, but the reality is, it's not so much urban encroachment. I mean, the places that there have always been fires in California.
Right.
What's happening is that, and yes, there is climate change. You have longer periods where there's no rain. So all those things contribute to the intensity of the fires and stuff. But it's not like the fires are in urban areas per se. I mean,
I got you. Who you think is the biggest violator of the climate, man? I got my opinion. Who you think it is? I just want to see if there's any real equivocation.
I think fossil fuel companies.
Heyward?
You know,
Heyward?
Well, my question would be, Governor Jerry Brown was on TV about 3 weeks ago, and he implied that he thought the reaction of the federal government would have been different had the president not been involved with immigration matters on the southern border of California. In that,
He was just joking, I'm sure.
in that he thought that the president's hands were tied somewhat in getting aid to all of California, but particularly to the northern area where the president and federal fire relief went in Northern California.
I don't think it had an impact at all. I mean, I don't think it's like immigration is not an issue in Northern California.
There's plenty of them there, yeah, I hear you. Plenty of
You know,
immigrants.
it's not like there's tons of people streaming into Northern California. They got to get through Southern California before they get to Northern California. So the immigration issues and his policies had nothing to do with the fire per se.
Oh, so you're disagreeing with the governor?
I don't. Well, Governor Brown is like, you know, I mean, I don't think he thinks that there's a response, and it wasn't necessarily a slow response. It's a big fire. It's not like there's like, oh, well, let's not send help.
Say how big it is again, Mike. Maybe you ought to say how big is. You said, give those measurements again.
Like I said, just think of it like this: Manhattan is 15,000 acres. So the campfire was 110,000 acres or something like that. So it's massive.
You mean like 10 Manhattans? The fire is 10?
I would say 10 Manhattans.
10 Manhattans, they had fire with the smoke and burn your ass up, all that with it.
That's about right, like I said. So if you can imagine that much smoke, because the smoke out here, it could be just as bad. I live maybe 15 miles from where the intense fires were. But you can see the smoke where I live. I mean, it's all over. It spreads all over the county and as far as you can see. You know, but it changes the air. You know, smoke quality, air quality is bad. Not so much where I live, but you can see, and you can go outside and you can literally smell the smoke in the air. So.
You know, hey Mike, it's funny. I was in L.A. and we were riding out of Inglewood into downtown LA on the highway, and we were in the car and the windows was down, and I saw like the smog, and I was trying to roll up the window, and the people in the car was going, "What's wrong with you?" I was going, "Look, you don't see that smog?" And they said, "What are you talking about? They got smog in New York." And I said, "But you can't see it. You can't see the dirt here, man. You can see that smog there, and if you got smog and the smoke from a fire, that's got to be." I remember standing on 125th Street after 9/11 when what's that ball player, the guy who was the legend guy died, Manigo, and everybody showed up for his funeral, and we were standing on 116th Street, and everybody was going, "What's that smell, man? Something's burning." It's going, "Yo, man, that's World Trade Center, man."
That's right. You were able to see the World Trade Center smoke
you can
from
smell it,
45th Street and 8th Avenue.
You know, so I can imagine if you got a fire 5 times the size of Manhattan burning. Oh, but Mike, let me just, my question was, my other question was, I had asked you about the climate change as you brought it up. I think that the biggest violators of the climate change are airplanes, man. Come on, man. What's wrong with everybody, man? You know, if you want to really get up off that climate change, you can't have airplanes flying around, dropping fossil fuel in the upper atmosphere day in and day out. That's retarded. I'm sorry. Does anybody, did anybody agree with me on that? Does that make any sense to anybody? Anybody thought of that?
I never thought of it.
How about you, Stu?
Never thought of it, and I don't know what the order of magnitude of it is when you say biggest, but certainly it's got to be huge.
I'm just saying that they do it all the time, unfettered, with all kinds of engines that we know nothing about, burning fuel, flying all over the damn place like a bunch of nuts. I mean, continuously, man. Sorry, man.
You get more pollution and things that contribute to climate change from people farming, right? I mean, you know.
And Mike, you read that somewhere, man? Did you read that somewhere?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going. Let's go with the what I didn't read test that I just took. I took the I didn't read nothing test. I just used my lying ass eyes. There's airplanes. They're putting fuel out. Their emissions in the air all day, every day, all over the effing world. Now you trying to tell me that a farmer in the middle of bumfuck China is doing more damage than that, Mike?
Yes.
I resemble that remark. Mike, I don't believe you're a liar. Hey, Mike, you're a liar.
No. I mean, look, think about you talk about smog and all that stuff out here. When I first came out to LA, I
scared the shit out of me.
Smog. Maybe the first or second time I was out here, I could literally see it. It's like a brown layer.
Yeah, I bugged me out. I was bugged out when I saw that.
It's absolutely that's real. But now, first off, that's changed because obviously it's changed. You know, the requirements.
Well, this was the '80s. This was Magic Johnson. This was the '80s. This was the '80s when I was there.
But the other thing that you have out here, which again, people who have not been to Los Angeles or been on the West Coast or really outside of a lot of East Coast cities, people here drive everywhere. There's cars everywhere. I mean, it's not like in New York you come outside, you walk to the store, people come here.
Atlanta is like that too.
Excuse me?
Atlanta, Georgia is like that too.
Oh yes, no, absolutely. Atlanta. I mean, well, what I found, from traveling around when I was covering the NBA, is that New York, Chicago, Boston on a smaller level are some of the few cities that have like major public transportation systems. So
not Chicago.
Chicago they have trains and stuff, but not as deep as.
Look, in Chicago, the number 7. I looked this up, Mike. The number 7 line in New York City is bigger than the whole Chicago transit subway system. So that's small time potatoes compared to where you are. This is the king of all riding around on the train, just like you live in the king of all riding around in your car.
Right. Well, and the thing is,
you want to ride around in your car, move to LA.
Even here in LA, there's a subway system in LA. I mean, people are in the train system. I mean, it's like it's relatively small, and
Are you talking about the Hyperloop?
Excuse me?
Are you talking about Elon Musk's Hyperloop that he built in Hawthorne?
No, that's something else.
He built that in Hawthorne, California, and people. I read a nice article. I get the LA. You got to watch out, Mike. I get the LA Times. They have a free newsletter. I get that, Mike. I'm just letting you know, Mike. We here on the East Coast is checking behind your monkey behind.
Hey, listen, man.
I'm just saying. Just saying, man. That's Bronx High School of Science. Fake.
Every day, and I read the Daily News, Post, Times, and the LA Times, all online, and
all for free. Tell the truth.
I keep up with all. I try to anyway.
You didn't say all of it is FREE. You didn't say that.
Oh no, that's the most important thing.
Oh. You don't leave out the most important thing. FREE, Mike.
My bad. Because the LA Times, actually, the LA Times, the paper itself costs like $2.
Yes. Well, the Daily News and the New York Post, $1.50.
Man, what happens to free?
And the Sunday Times here costs $6.
Wow.
$6.
Well, hey, Heyward, and this is up to both of y'all. What about when, papers were the leads of technology? Because the portability of it, it was printed. It was, at one time, paper was the, on the forefront. The newspaper was on the forefront of technology. I guess in books as well. And now you don't have that. I mean, how do the reporters? Are they all social media acolytes?
Well, I look at it a little bit differently, perhaps. Than
How about
Mike,
that, Stu? How about that? See what I did this?
SAT work.
I look at it a little bit
SAT
differently than perhaps Mike does, in the sense that because of the new technology, I think more people know more about what's happening all over the world quicker than ever before.
Except for about jet planes.
And that makes all the difference in the world. I'm glad that my grandchildren, for instance, are in the technology age as opposed to the book and newspaper.
Yeah, but those were technologies.
As opposed,
You mean that's different technology?
They have been superseded. And if you're talking about progress in this country or scientific invention or any of those types of things where things go from A to B to C to D, then we're very lucky to be living in the age we are now, because we would not have known about the fires in California the way we do. We see their pictures, we can call up the pictures and see the anguish and suffering of the people.
Through the machine in the pocket?
Through the new technology and all of that. And that was not possible when you had paper and books. So I'm a paper and book guy, as you well know, and as our viewers can see just from where we're sitting today. But I think the future has been reached, and it's a lot better with technology and the ability of so many people to see so many things all over the world.
Every time I come here, there's one. Excuse me for a second, Mike. Every time you can't see this, but Mike, we're sitting in the Riverside, not the headquarters of Pro Pyramid, and this is. By the way, this podcast will be on YouTube, posted on YouTube next week, so people can see it, Mike. So we did our first episode without you because we couldn't find you, but it's on our YouTube channel. But if you look around here, he has all of these books, and there's one book that keeps calling me, and one day, when we come here, you have to talk about it, and it's called White Trash. I'm just saying, that book is over there singing. Well, yo, man.
Actually, that book was sent to me by my sister. She always sends me a book on my birthday, and she sent me the book White Trash. If you notice, surrounding it, I have several other titles where it talks about the impoverished or angry white man.
Hey Mike, that's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show. The angry white saltine.
And it was a precursor to the Trump administration, because here we are a year and a half after I got the book. We are now in the midst of the Trump administration, and many people say that his base, which has supported him all along, is really composed of what might be deemed elements of white trash by a lot of other authors. That's not my term, but as you indicated, the books are starting to flow out now, and many people now see it because of Trump as a justification for, quote, making America great again.
Well, I'm going to go with this, since you brought it up, I'm going to go with the question that I asked you, the Rhodes Scholar, approximately, we were having a conversation, and I had this conversation with Michael George as well, by the way, but they just weren't together. But now that both of you guys are here, we can have it together. I asked, particularly you, Heyward, when was America great again? Remember that? Mm-hmm. I called you up and I said, hey man, when was America great again? Because they keep saying we're going to make America great again. So I said, from a historical perspective, why don't we, so that we'd have, and I know Michael George would like this because he's a research maven, by the way, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. And Michael George is very big on research. So I thought in order to have the research, Mike, you need to have some sort of baseline so that you could get people to see what the hell's going on. So we got a scholar here We got a guy who's from Stuyvesant High School, Columbia University. We got Mr. Stu Reed, who's also from Columbia University, by way of the Hiawatha Project. I didn't say that right. Off-Way Project. Sorry, my bad. The Hiawatha. By way of the Off-Way Projects in Cleveland, who also went to Columbia. And of course, you got me, graduate from the University of Cornell Lenox Avenue, along with Michael George. So Michael George.
I thought you went to Dannemora High.
I took my
that was a graduate study, wasn't it?
Thank you, Steve.
Oh.
I took my preparatory studies at Elmira, and from Elmira I then went to the Dannemora State Penitentiary, where I took my advanced courses in staying out of prisoners.
But to answer your question, when was America great before? A lot of that depends on whether you're going to give me a white skin or a black skin.
Let's go with the white skin for 500, Bob.
All right. Well, if I'm white skin, I certainly go back to 1948 to 1949 when the courts.
1 year?
That whole period up until then, from 1830, or certainly from 1830 to 1945, because all the courts, all the schools were barred to us.
Us meaning
black skin.
Because there's some people who are only listening to this and who can't see you, so that they know that there's some older black gentlemen talking. Right?
Yes. Okay. Well, when it was meant for white skins to go to school, it was meant for white skins to get justice in court. It was meant for white skins to be paid for their labor. It was meant for white skins to be able to receive adequate medical treatment. And it was when white people had literally saved the world, i.e. from other white people, Germans, Italians, etc., during World War II and World War I.
Are you saying when the Great War, which was the first war, which they thought it was so big they didn't put a number on it, they had to wait till Hitler they have to start numbering their wars. But when at the end of the Great War,
the war to end all
wars, they were saving the world from white people?
Yes, and that was a surprise.
Isn't that curious?
No, not curious. They did. It was reluctantly done, I might add, but they did it anyway because people forget in our country at that time, and I think currently,
there's a lot of forgetting going on around here. By the way,
the majority of white-skinned people in this country come from Germany. In the United States, in 2018. The majority of white people in this country come from Germany.
And so if you
not England, not Italy, not Ireland, not Finland, not Sweden, but from Germany.
So we had somebody from Ancestor 23, which I think is crazy. Why would you give somebody your DNA and tell them your name and your address? When I look at that commercial, I was going, whoever sends that in apparently has never been to prison. But so I would never, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? I'm talking about give your name and address and who you really are. Why would you do that part of it?
Well, if you trust America and you don't intend to be a criminal, perhaps you might consider it.
I'm not going to be able to do it. Michael George, what say you on the Make America Great Again?
Well,
did that question ever come across your mind, Mike? When that came across as soon as the
President Trump.
As soon as Trump won, I said, as soon as he's talking about, I kept saying, well, when was the place great?
Well, I would say that and according to an article I read, the time that Donald Trump was
always qualifies
was July 14th, 1957.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What happened? What happened on that day?
No, I'm just making up that date.
Oh, Mike, that was his Mike.
As the era.
Mm-hmm. But 1957, there were people who were saying, well, when was America great? Let's say 1957. Okay, look at 1957, what was going on. We're 8 years away from World War II. The beamers on television is just beginning to develop, into the people's homes and stuff.
They were the government had a program where if you were white and you was in the military, you can get easy government money to build a home, like Levittown and all those places. Just like the government did back in the 1800s when they wanted to expand the country, they were giving men, mostly white men, land and territory and all these things to help them to be great and better. You mean that America? Is that America still around?
Yeah.
Oh, but now, okay, so that America exists for people who have what kind of skin?
Well, I mean,
He'll never say.
you know, Doug, you and I have talked about this before. We probably talked about it on the show, making references to the history of America by Howard Zinn.
Yes.
When you read Howard Zinn's History of America, you get a whole different perspective on everything in America. Everything from the very beginning, from the days of our founding fathers to so-called founding fathers.
Well, but who's Howard Zinn? I mean, who's Howard Zinn?
Howard Zinn was.
Well, Heyward, tell them who Howard Zinn is.
Howard Zinn was a journalist, scholar, teacher who wrote several books, not just one, about the status of America back in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And when the student revolutions started in the late 60s and early 70s, Howard Zinn was one of those people, even though he was Jewish, who was allowed to contribute to that discussion.
Did he go to Columbia or something like that?
I don't think he went to Columbia, but he certainly had a lot of influence in the Ivy League schools at that time. But he generally pointed out that Americans were satisfied. And that's what it is. When we talk about white trash, or when we talk about immigration, or when we talk about forest fires up in Northern California, we're talking about Americans, quote, white Americans, no longer being satisfied. And Howard Zinn, and I would argue that when President Trump talks about being America great, he had other people in mind. People like Bull Connor, people like George Wallace, people like the fellow Joe McCarthy.
I was going to say Joe Paccio.
The people who are watching out for communists coming in. People forget, during Franklin Delano Roosevelt was always vilified because they asked President Roosevelt, well, do you think we should have done what we did to the Germans after World War II started, when America deported about 16,000 Germans? We're not talking about the Japanese and the others who were also placed in incarceration, but America deported and incarcerated 16,000 Germans.
So wait a minute, are you saying that, because I learned that when I used to work in the place, they would talk about the culture, and they would say how you would define culture is like by using the word around here. So you saying around here in America we deport motherfuckers? Or the regular, no matter what kind, who they are, white, black, we don't care?
Well, these were
I mean, historically speaking.
No. We deported enemies of America.
I said MS, I'm sorry.
And it's enemies at that time of white America because black, Latino, and other Americans weren't allowed to participate in government. They were not citizens. When Trump talks about let's make America great again, he is talking about making America great again for only a certain class and group of citizens. And that is the major crime in America.
I think you're giving Donald Trump way too much credit. I don't think Donald Trump even knows what it means when he's saying make America great again.
So what, Mike?
Yes,
so what?
I don't see where
so what they got to do with anything? So what? I mean, the fact that they would put a certified maroon in charge of everything, I think that makes Heyward's case. I mean, they gotta. I mean, the fact that you could say that and nobody is laughing because you said it, I think makes his case. You know what I'm saying, Mike?
I would simply point out, let's take a look at the people around President Trump. Some people have compared his presidency to that of Adolf Hitler, but people forget Adolf Hitler didn't have a presidency with public servants around him. He had a court, and with his courtiers and sycophants, and they were around him, and they did his bidding. Donald Trump has tried to recreate that, and when he talks about making America great again, he's talking about making America great for very, very privileged Americans who own the land, who told other white trash what to do, and who kept blacks and Hispanics from even walking, participating in their neighborhoods. You lived on the other side of the tracks. You kept them down in Mexico. So that, to me, is quite a different story from saying that he was ignorant about what he was saying. I'm sure he knew exactly what he was saying, and he intended it to be done for that very select group of white property owners who had run the country.
Okay, well, I'm going to be an equivocator instead of letting Mike get any part of that. I think both you guys are particularly right. But I think the danger here, Mike, is not to watch out, not to look at the stupid things that he says. Because you're right. If you look at any way that things are being done, the things that he says basically makes no sense. He doesn't really, sounds very immature. But the fact that he's there and he's able to do it, and they all are going along with that, tells me that maybe they want him to say that stuff because now you're not looking at you're busy worrying about what he's saying and not looking at what he's doing. And somehow or another, the people have gotten kind of smart and people are kind of looking at what he's doing because they're going like, even if he is that stupid, and I don't think you get anybody to argue against that, they put him in charge. And I don't know who the they is or whatever, but he's in charge, and people are actually listening to him. Which I think is crazy. That people are listening to him.
Well, I don't, because this is I just heard a show about the NFL, and one of the caller-ins were complaining about the halftime shows, particularly on days like Thanksgiving. He said, people who watch football don't want to see people up there singing and dancing for 10, 15 minutes, lip-syncing. They're there to watch football, and they should cut out all this halftime entertainment. Well, that's just not the way the powers that be wanted. It's bread and circuses. It's America, the #1 nation in the world, and we earned it because we beat the killers of the world, the Nazi Germans.
Well, Mike, I'm just saying, Mike, that's why I think you have to look past the obvious that he is saying the things that he's saying. Because he could be saying all those things. I mean, if you really want to take it to the most paranoid and all that, he could just be out there saying all that stuff to misdirection. And that would still be quite an effective method of it. Because when you really just look at him, look at what he does just for
and who he surrounds himself with.
Well, I was getting ready to go. That's what I was going with. When you just look at, when you get a load of the optics of it all, you got to say to yourself, come on, man, he got to know that the optics of it doesn't look like you want to have the we in there. There's no us in there. There's only them or they. And, I keep thinking about something Obama said going out the door, and he said, if you divide people by whatever means, he said, when you need them to come together, they're not going to do it. And he's right. And you just know that from because Mike, you and I used to be teammates, so you know just how that is. And I keep trying to lay on that whole idea of what we learned about teamwork in sports and take and move that over into the political thing or the culture, and you see that they're not doing it. There's no teamwork. They're not even thinking about teamwork. They're worshiping the gods of winning.
And we have a somewhat of a similar situation here in New York City when it comes to public housing, because the de Blasio administration and the housing population are not really working together. The language may be there, the sympathy may be there. Every once in a while we'll get the optics, the photo op of everybody, but it's the de Blasio team that is calling all the shots, allocating all the money, not making repairs, not doing the types of things that will improve the lives of the public housing residents.
They can't.
Well, I don't know about Kent. There's a lot of money available.
I'm talking about culturally. Because they have the money.
I think so.
They have the money to do it, but the culture that they use to run.
Yes, I think they're in the same culture as we've been talking about.
Yeah, because they have a culture of there's a culture of the city government of around here. Here's what we do, and the city government
take it or leave it.
Around here, there's some again like last week. There are 26 mayoral agencies but that by some magical algorithm, they all figured out collectively to spend 95% of their municipal spend with one group of people of the same race and the same gender. And you juxtapose that with the village of black people that the professor talked about earlier. You juxtapose that with the village concept, and you would realize that the New York City Housing Authority has more people than the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont, just to finish, the state of Vermont has a $12 billion budget. The state of Vermont has a $12 billion budget, and the New York City Housing Authority has a $3 billion budget, and it's bigger and more people wrestled inside of this big the city that you're talking about, Michael, in terms of the size of it, and they take all of the money, the municipal money, and they use it for whatever they think is good for them.
And there's the even more important reason. There's the even more important reason, Doug.
What's more important than that?
The number of registered citizens who vote in this city are majority black and Hispanic.
Well, wait a minute.
And they do not get any representation or leadership from the mayoralty's office commensurate with their voting strength.
Wait a minute. I think I would have to disagree with you, Professor. I don't think they're getting. I don't think they're not getting any leadership. I don't think they ask for any. I don't think they demand any leadership. I don't think they even get that you need to have leadership. I don't even think that they know that this is a real game that they're playing in. I don't think they know any of those kinds of things. So therefore, the Blasios in the world and the people in front of them, they didn't have to do anything because there's no demands on them to do those things.
I would disagree with you there.
I wouldn't mind that.
Demanding at this point is ineffectual. The tools for a proper demand are not there.
Gotta love those Columbia guys, Michael Jones. You gotta love those Bronx High School science guys. They have this shit.
And let me just
bring
up an aside that I think proves my point. For years, we had this notion as part of the public discussion that black men, in particular, black people in general, would not fight for their rights. And it's only now about dogs being sick on women and children.
They should colorize that.
It's only now that you have respect from whites. Why? Because all of a sudden they have trained some black and Hispanic men in the military to be sharpshooters, killers, assassins, and every once in a while, every 2 years or so, one of those trained minorities, who are the majority in most situations, have come out and killed some white folks. And that is the only way you get white folks respect. And I point out the Japanese, I point out Native Americans, and I point out the Germans as an example of getting respect because they were able to kill white people. Now,
Native Americans get respect in this country?
Yes. When that paratrooper killed those 4 people, they got respect, particularly when they found out that he had been trained and had been a sharpshooter in the United States Army. Because all of a sudden, you have about 3,000 people who might turn against you at any point, and additionally might protect their race in a way that's never been done before.
Oh, you agree with that, Mike?
No, not at all.
Oh, you don't agree with that? Because to me, he's just talking about, you know, the specifics of what he thinks is the thing.
How you get respect from someone?
It could be
as an athlete. How did you get respect for another athlete?
I don't know.
He had to come and smack you in the head, take the ball from you, and see, here you go. It wasn't going to happen.
No,
but if he did it, he would have gotten your retaliation.
Mike, you know I'm not like that, Mike.
Right, and nobody ever smacked me in the head to get my respect.
Me neither. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, Bronx High School of Science is different. I mean, pacifism had to have a birthplace, and I tend to believe it started in the Bronx at Bronx High School of Science.
And Mike, he's making a point about what we were talking about earlier, Mike, about the the kind of psychology of being on the when you're on the team, and how much crap or shit you're gonna take from another person.
That's right.
That part of it, I think we would both have to agree with him on that part, Mike.
Well, I mean, you're only going to take so much, but the point is this. You know, it's like you have to look at the bigger picture. If you're on the same team with somebody and y'all not getting along, then y'all don't have the big picture in mind. Y'all just have personal issues in mind.
What that got to do with anything, Mike?
Yes, and who's more personal? Who's more personal in their attitudes and reactions than white people? White leadership, white politicians. They make it personal.
Let me say this. This is one of the reasons I brought up the Howard Bennett reference, right? Because I bought the book, the particular book I was referring to was called The History of America, History of the People's History of the United States of America. And I opened up the book. I started reading the first chapter, and I ended up throwing the book against the wall because I couldn't stand it. It was so much truth that it was killing me, right? So I literally did not pick up the book again. For like 2 years. I said, you know what? I gotta read. I bought it. Let me read it. So I started reading through it, and they go back to Columbus and everything, and you're finding out things about things that you didn't know anything about. So one of the things, and not to make a long story short, one of the things I walked away with from the book is that the idea of race is a construct, right? When you read about the history and the founding fathers could give anybody except themselves. Imagine 15 old white dudes in a room who own most of the stuff that's around, most of literally the land, everything. They're sitting there trying to figure out how are we going to keep all of this for ourselves.
So are you saying that's when Donald Trump was saying "Make America Great"? Are you saying that he was talking about that era?
He wasn't talking about that era. He's
Okay.
just a continuing of the beginning. It's like we listen. And Doug, you and I think I've referenced this before. There are 80 million people who don't vote. Don't vote at all, who are eligible to vote, but don't vote. They don't register, they don't give a hoot about who's doing what in politics. To Heyward's point, and we were saying this before, most people don't know anything about civics. They don't know how to do. There could be 10 people killed on a corner, and literally, where I lived on 117th Street, there was a stop sign, right? There were car crashes or some type of auto accident there every other week. Somebody was getting hit, cars hitting. So at some point, the people in the community said, well, why do we get a stoplight here? How do we get a stoplight here?
They put a lot of them there, Mike. There's a lot of them there now. Cause that used to be a little raceway. You're right.
Well, I'm just saying, people don't know. And here's a classic example for me on a personal level. In the St. Nicholas projects, I remember when I was back in New York, I was seeing a group of friends of mine who were sitting in the projects and having a meeting. And at some point I said, well, what are you guys having a meeting about? And they were saying, well, they're going to build a high school here in the middle of the projects. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. I said, you guys are meeting about it. When is this supposed to start? The building is supposed to start. It's like, well, whatever the date was, 2010 or 2011 or whatever. I said, you guys are meeting about this now? I said, they're slated to start building in 3 years or 2 years. I said, you guys are too late. You're not going to be able to stop it. So they were like, well, what? We can complain, we can get petitions. I said, listen, it all started when they had the tenants meeting, and only 6 people showed up in the house from the St. Nicholas projects. 7 people showed up. The developers were there. They said, listen, this is what we want to do. Those 7 people signed off on it. It was a done deal. Next thing you know, they go to the community board. And hey, what you know about this? The community board signs up, signs off.
Yes.
Right? And then, because nothing gets built in New York without the okay of the community boards. They signed off on it. Then you get a elected representative, congressman, assemblyman, or somebody to put their backing on it. So when you see the sign go up, it says, you see everybody's got their little credit on the sign going up on the building. So in the middle of the St. Nicholas projects, which were the only projects in New York that had a cul-de-sac, 129th Street, right, ended in the middle of the St. Nicholas projects. Now the street goes all the way through. They built the high school there. It's a charter. They built the high school in the middle of the projects where we used to play We had this called a circle. We played football there and all this stuff. But the point I'm getting to is that by the time the people realized what was going on, they were 5 years too late in terms of getting some action done in terms of stopping this project from going up. Most people have no idea how civics works. They don't know what the politicians are doing. They don't know what their congressmen are doing. They don't know how to get in touch with their congressman or their congresswoman. So, you know, if you start there, and then you see how it's approached in the school. They don't teach you things that you need to know about money, taxes, cooking. I mean, there used to be civics, all these things that were required at one point, but to go back to, you know, Heyward was saying about 1947 and 1948, one of my big, in my mind, historically, is when they decided to integrate the schools. They also decided to stop teaching. So you know, it's like, okay, we'll integrate the schools, but we're not going to teach anybody anything of any value, right? And what we're seeing now, to Heyward's point when he was saying, you know, he loves the technology and everything, I think it's absolutely incredible. But the fact that people, and Doug, your comment on it, you said people walk around with a computer in their pocket.
I said machine.
A machine in their pocket. They have access to everything, but people are dumber than they've ever been to me. I mean, the fact that people have access to it doesn't mean that they're going to use it, you know. And I also think there's something lost in the fact that, you know, we're from a pen and paper, you know, world or whatever you want to call it. We're from what's the word? What's the opposite of digital?
Analog.
From an analog world, but what we're seeing on some levels to me, it's interesting. One of the biggest sellers in music last year was vinyl records.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, and you know what else is coming back? Kodak, I think Polaroid, is now
That's
making
right.
these cameras.
Well, things work,
push
Mike.
out actual pictures.
They work.
There's a lot of people in the millennials have never held a photograph in their hand. The point I'm getting to is that there was something with all the technology we have, with all, you know, being able to read a book on a piece of glass, right? There's something lost when you're not turning the pages. There's something lost in that.
Well, that's cultural, Mike. That's cultural, and you're right. That is cultural, but you have zeroed in on the most important part of it, and that's ignorance. And I think that therein lies the rub. I think, you know, people are very ignorant about the political system, and the system is geared that way. And it's geared to make people not participate. It's geared to only have select people participate. That's why you have gerrymandering. You wouldn't have gerrymandering if people weren't looking to have selected people be the ones that make the decision. So, what I'm just going to say is that you can't really blame the people when the culture is set up to work a certain way. You have to educate.
And the thing is, I'm not going to blame the people.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying, but that's what's going on. That's what's going on.
Right, and the idea of, you know, I mean, things are partially are the way they are because it was a plan, and it was planned from the beginning. I mean, look, in the Revolutionary War, after, you know, the Minutemen, the Minutemen and the soldiers that were fought in the American Revolution were paid. But the people who hired them, those didn't want to pay them. They had to go on strike to get paid.
That's American right there, bro.
And that's how we got General MacArthur, of course, because we didn't want to pay the soldiers who had fought in World War I.
Well, I'm just saying, listen.
It's America, it's a culture. They don't want to pay for shit. And so...
And also, Mike, there's another realization. In the last 4 years, you have, for the very first time since the early and late 60s, you've had mass demonstrations by ordinary citizens. I point out to this U2 movement, the Wall Street movement, the Black Lives Matter, Me Too, the Black Lives Matter movement, and all of that. So, and now we have all of these women elected to Congress. They would never have been elected to Congress unless they had been a Donald Trump, who tried to speak to them as if they were 3-year-olds, and they knew better. They knew that the livelihood of their kids, the health of their kids, the education of their families, were all dependent upon them taking on the leadership. In this case, the political leadership at the highest level. So I tend to think you may be right in part about the past, but the last 4 years, I think you're absolutely wrong, because these ideas are percolating in numbers and with a frequency that the United States has never seen before, and you're not going to put any genies back in any bottle as long as women want the world to be nice and safe, and as long as young teenagers are young teenagers and don't want to be told what to do by anybody. And you see it with the immigrants in that caravan. You see it in the southern states like Georgia and Tennessee. You see it in the middle section of the country.
What are we seeing in those states?
You're seeing young people not accepting the status quo. Stacey Adams, who ran for governor of Georgia and lost by 1 percentage point, would not have been possible had it not been for young people, white and black, between the ages of 21 and 32. They were the ones who all of a sudden made the governorship of Georgia a ball game. And it happened all over the country. And with this new technology, those records, those visuals, those optics will always be there and will only be more influential as time goes on, because people want to show their kids, look at me, even if it's look at me when I was taking this facey.
Hey, let me ask you something, Mike. There's things on technology, things that are there to make sure that you don't know anything. Candy Crush, there's games, there's stuff that they put out there that's a complete and total distraction. Yes, the idea, if you're paying attention, yeah, the technology is a great thing. You can add your access. You don't have to ask anybody how many things are this, how many countries are there in Africa. You know, most people won't give you an answer, but they don't know. But now you can go into their machine and look it up and tell you. You know, so yes, there's more access, there's more awareness. But there's a lot of people, and listen, you know, there's a lot of people, even with the access, still don't have access, and that's one of the things that Doug and Stu have been doing for years. You know, with their projects and business and stuff. It's like they know that people, but for all it's worth, everybody doesn't have access. You know, everybody can't. You know, I mean, it's portrayed that way sometimes, particularly in the media.
My point is, not everybody will have to have the type of access that we've been familiar with previously. They're going to have access to maybe some very general ideas, but they're also going to have access to a few people, maybe a lot of people, who want to accomplish those items, those issues, and complete them.
I agree with you, but all I'm saying is that those people are awake. I'm not. Listen.
And you're finding that in the housing projects here in New York City. It's taking them two de Blasio administrations, but finally we're getting black and Hispanic people with their list of demands and demanding that the mayor hold himself accountable. Not they hold the mayor accountable, that the mayor and the city council hold themselves accountable. And you're getting more blacks and Hispanics on the city council, and that's being done.
So there, Michael George, how you like those apples?
Well, I'll tell you how I like the apples. Like I said, I'm all for progress, and there's always been progress. There's more black people on TV. There's more, you know, a little bit more of everything somewhere.
There's more money going to blacks on TV, more awards, more prestige, more people listening to them. Everything is increasing because minorities have a voice, however that voice is attained.
Well, hey Mike, let me just say this to both of y'all. You know, I hear that, you know, there is more, but I think, you know, you're starting from like shit.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'm not all like.
Yes,
I'm not all excited about the more part. I am excited by this, because in my mind, forget about all the specifics and everything that's going on. That's not what's important. In my mind, what's important is that people are walking around with a machine in their pocket, and people now cannot say that they don't know.
No, that's right.
Can't do that no more. You used to could do that. The whole idea about access, that's all bullshit. That's all bullshit because anybody can get one of these machines right here that I'm holding up, and Michael George is talking on it right now. If you have one of these machines, and mostly everybody does, then you can know something. And I think somebody's going to connect the dots, Michael George, Heyward, and Stu, and somebody's going to figure out, just like we was talking about the airplanes, they're going to start thinking about the real cause and effect about things that are going on, about the, as Bernie Mac would say, about the goings-ons that's goings-ons. And he said it that way, by the way. I don't know why he did, but he did.
But you know what? You're absolutely right. But people haven't made the connection.
They will. They will, Michael George.
And I would disagree. I think people are making the connection.
Well,
this is 3 to 5 years. Let me talk about this 15 to 20 years, which is no long period of time for a historian, certainly, and not even for a social critic. And I think we'll be talking about a different situation.
Soon as that, Mike, I'm thinking like this, Mike. You brought up the point about the 80 million people who don't vote. Somebody's going to figure out that, hey, you know what? Everybody's walking around with a machine in their pocket, and everybody's supposed to file something with the IRS, and you could do it electronically. Maybe that's a way of verifying everybody that can vote without any fucking gerrymandering. Maybe they could do that without having a system that's predicated and designed to keep a certain thing working.
Or even just going to the popular vote. I mean, that makes a lot more sense
but you get into
today than 7 or 8 years ago.
All I'm saying is you get
the
into
most votes win.
All I'm saying
the best way to do that is to use these infernal machines, as I like to call them, to do.
Let's look at it like, you know what? You know why we vote on Tuesdays?
Nobody, I don't know, and I don't care. How about that? But you're gonna tell us anyway.
And it didn't stop anybody.
You're gonna tell us anyway, so go ahead.
It didn't stop anybody from voting for Stacey Adams on a Tuesday.
But the point is, Michael George, that the system that's there right now is designed for a whole nother thing, for a whole nother era, when things weren't going the right way. Why participate in that? What people need to do is look to change the system, because that's what's a fraud. You can pick out all the little picadillos within the system that are right or wrong. I mean, it's still a 35-year argument about these kinds of things. We've been arguing for 35 years about these little things back and forth. You can always argue about them. That's all I'm saying. What you really have to... Go ahead, Mike.
No, the reason I brought it up about why we vote on Tuesdays, and this goes to your point. The system is set up to keep things the way
that they are. But they can't, but they see, think this, Mike, we are human beings that are imprinted, our DNA is imprinted for evolution.
No, absolutely.
So we're not, we can't, it's innate upon us to keep looking to change things, to look for things that are better. We can't help it.
And there are people. And these people these are the people that started our country, that basically branched out into every area of...
And they don't want things to change, Mike. They don't...
I'm just saying that you're right. They want people want things to stay the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big effort, and there's been a huge effort to make sure that people don't know what to ask for.
It's a losing fight. Those who want to protect are too old. They're now in their 80s and 90s. They don't produce enough babies, so they're going to be outpopulated, and particularly in the urban areas, if not the entire country. And they don't meet the requirements of women who want their families taken care of in a way that is currently not happening. And these women, now through Congress as a start, will be changing everything. Schools, hospitals, and Congress.
Mike, let me just say this.
I'm not saying it's not going to be changed. I'm saying that there's things that, and I would hope that the women going into Congress, whoever's women and whoever's new congressional leaders, when I brought up the thing about voting on Tuesdays, and I mentioned earlier that the world is becoming digital, but the world is still run by a lot of people who live in an analog world, and that's real.
Yeah.
There's still people, that's like there's still people keeping records and papers and files and stuff. Everything is not on computer. Everything is not in some damn cloud somewhere and easily accessible. Listen, just in the last week out here, they've had a recall of romaine lettuce, right?
No, they're out here everywhere. Not out there, everywhere, even here.
Here in New York too.
Everywhere, the whole country.
Right. And they traced it back to some place probably here in California or whatever. But here's the other thing. I'm not a big fan of Walmart, but Walmart has a perfect system in terms of being able to track stuff. They're the farmers. They track from the farmers to the distributors to the stores. They can find out where some bad lettuce came from.
What's the point? What's the point, Mike?
The FDA, it takes them 5 weeks to find out where the damn lettuce came from.
They don't want to know, Mike.
Right.
Mike, they don't want to know.
Huh?
They don't want to know.
Well, I'm saying, because it's about selling and whatever. So
No.
why doesn't the government?
Because the system is a fraud, Mike. The government is fraudulent in a lot of ways, particularly.
Well, here's my point. It's like it's the same thing when I brought up the thing about voting on Tuesday. That goes back to something from the 1800s when farmers had to get their stuff to market, and they didn't want to do it on the weekends or whatever. So, and just this last
So you got
election,
the
they have
research.
3 states. Oregon, I think it's Oregon, might be Oregon, Washington, or whatever, where if you're eligible to vote, you don't have to wait till Tuesday or election day. You get your vote in the mail.
Bingo.
It's all paper ballot. You can drop your ballot off anytime, at drop boxes and stuff.
Mike, you can't fix that, can you, Mike? You would need the post office to help you to rig that. That's why they need the machines, Mike.
Well, I'm saying, but you can take, and here's the thing, in those states I mentioned, because and it's a bipartisan effort. What they found is that since they've been doing it this way, where everybody who's registered to vote gets mailed a ballot. That's how it works. You're registered to vote, you get mailed a ballot. You can mail your ballot back. You can drop it, or you can.
I don't think you should have to do that. That's stupid. What they should do is everybody that filed the.
Let me finish that. I'm just saying that this is what they found. They mail everybody who's registered to vote. It's not about getting people to not register. They just say if you're registered to vote, you're getting a ballot in the mail. You can mail it back. You can send it back to us this way.
And what's the outcome?
Nobody else touches it. What they found is that they've increased the number of people who are voting because they don't have to take off from work. And people might say, well, listen, the polls are open all day.
But Mike, they knew that, Mike. Why you think they had it on Tuesday? They want to keep the shit limited. They know that.
No, I'm explaining what. No, I agree with you. I'm just saying this, but
This is advanced class, boys and girls.
To do it in a way where it's like, they don't close the schools and banks and
Correct.
businesses on voting day. Well, if they did, you don't think more people would vote?
No, I think that I like the mailing thing. I think that everybody that filed the income tax return should vote. Fuck register. I don't think you should have to fucking register. If you paid your fucking taxes, the IRS should say, yo, your ass can vote. You've been certified, you pay your taxes. You can fucking vote. And all that other bullshit should go out the window. People shouldn't be so fucking stupid to think that, if you go there and press a machine, why they have that there? They have it there so they can fix it. So that they can rig this shit. What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with everybody? Why would you have a Byzantine system? So we can control it. That's what I would do, and I'm a fucking criminal.
There are people who...
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, listen,
I'm sorry, Mike.
There's a line from when they made the movie, the Miami Vice film, and they get into this Jeep with Jamie Foxx and the other guy, and they talk to the bad guy, and the bad guy basically says to them, he says, listen, I want you to do what you say you're going to do, but one of the other lines in it is that he says, people are stupid. Persons are smart. I understand that totally. You know, the people, generally speaking, aren't interested in things. When you talk to people on an individual basis, you find out that they have something to contribute, they have something to say. But generally speaking, you know, they blanket stuff, and they show us through television, commercials, music, all this stuff, things that are so general and that are so disconnected from things that are really important in your life. I mean, look, and I was going to say this earlier, I've met Donald Trump like half a dozen times, right, when he was trying to get into boxing in New York, and he was promoting.
This when you was when you was a reporter?
When I was a reporter.
Okay, for the Post. Okay.
And I realized two things, because I remember the first time I met him, I remember the way I was dressed, right? And in my mind, later on, I was underdressed. And somebody said, well, you need to dress differently. My friend Anna Carrillo.
Yes, I did.
And said, no, you got to, you have to dress a little different. So the next time next time I saw Donald Trump, I was wearing I had on a suit, I was different, and
you had your Uncle Tom clothes.
Huh?
You had on your Uncle Tom clothes.
Well, the thing is, what I...
Or should I say uniform?
Well, yeah, no, I put on the right uniform.
Yeah, okay. All right, that works. Yeah, forget the Uncle Tom part.
I'm trying, because I'm also, I'm there.
You working?
Well, whatever, I'm getting the story. But,
yeah, you working.
I also realized that, look, and growing up in Harlem and projects and whatever, you're looking at a guy, it's like, yeah, okay, this dude is real. Whatever he's doing is jinky, right? And jinky is,
We know what that means, man.
Huh?
We know. Listen, he's actually now proven to everybody what jinky really means.
Right, he's a jinky dude.
Yeah, he is
jinky. It's like an urban word that has no truth.
But they all been jinky, Mike. They all been jinky all along. And the point, me and Heyward have this running conversation, and the point I think is that now all of a sudden, and I'm blaming it on the machines. Other people have their own theories. Because of the machines, people now can see and hear the utter stupidity that he has. And look how long it took them before they decided that he was an unequivocal liar. In 2 years. They have, this country has a very slow sense. And the same thing with this dude, the president. We look beyond the obvious with the guy in that he doesn't care about what anybody says. He's a psychopath. Look it up. I've looked it up. I sent the email around about it. If you look at the definition of a psychopath, he's that. He fits every category of that. Number two, he's a liar. And he does what liars do. He lies. Now, they figured it out, but what the problem is, like Jim Brown said to Richard Pryor, they don't have the answer to what you're going to do about it. They don't have the answer because they've never had a situation where they've allowed someone that's within their kingdom to come in and be all about one thing and one thing only, winning. Now, people wouldn't think he's a racist. I don't think he's any of that. I think he's all about one thing, winning. And the fact that he's a psychopath and a liar. But he's about winning. And he don't care about nothing else but winning. And because of the nature of the country and the politics, people are taking a position behind that. And it doesn't help everybody. So you have to have a way to look at the system and say, you know what, as the Stu's man, Ika Mouse would say, I think that's him. Mutabaruka, the system is a fraud. Because of what you said earlier. Because it was set up by one small group of people who was only looking out for themselves. And you can't have that. But they can't do that, Mike, because
it's not going to stay that way.
It can't.
Because the Republican Party has too many old crocs in it over the age of 75. Because the Republican Party has lost control of the House of Representatives and they're never going to get it back. And because the Republican Party mistreats their own women, so they have no idea what these new women do.
He doesn't mean Republican Party. He means EWMs, and that's elite white men. That's what he really means. Because it's not the Republican Party. It's the elite white men who benefit not only in that party, But Mike,
We're
this is
watching the death of an elephant.
Well, we
Now,
are.
The question is,
it's not the party.
Are there young elephants waiting to
It's not the
take over
party.
the herd, or are they going to be replaced by a new species?
I believe it's not the party, Michael George and Professor. I believe it's not the party. I think we're watching the death of the elite white men phenomenon. That's what's going down. The people understand, I believe, and I could be wrong, when you look at the news and think that people see that there's only one benefactor for everything in this culture. Only one. And that's the EWMs, the elite white men. They're the only ones that benefit.
Well, that's what I said. Listen, they started it.
Oh, you call them EWMs too? You like that? Elite white men?
Well, I mean, listen, they've been in history.
This cannot not equip it.
The big our spin on it has been our founding fathers.
I'm saying that right now that the
all the founding fathers had founding fucking mothers.
who, and by the way, if they live here in New York City and they want to do business, their mothers and daughters are minorities. Just by the way. So that's when Professor says they don't treat their women they don't, because the EWMs that when I hope that Mr. Reed puts up a graphic. EWMs, the elite white men. When these people, if you're looking around in our culture, forget about all this other stuff. You look at our culture, who are the winners? They are. Who are the richest? They are. Who gets all the benefits of the culture? They do. Who makes all the policy of the culture? Them. Who makes all the rules in the culture? They do. Who teaches the kids or misteaches the kids? They do. Who controls the budget? They do. Who controls the police? I'm not even done yet. That's how much stuff that they control, Mike. Who controls the currency? They do. Now that's the country, and then they control the mechanism for voting. That's the thing that has to change.
Not only
That was deep, man. That was deep.
Their other mission is to make sure, first off, that they give you the illusion that you, the individual, have something to say about it. And you don't. Because you don't know the machinery, the mechanisms to...
Well, people know now, Mike, because of the machine in their pocket, because of Facebook, because of other social media.
There's a facade, to me, there's a facade of connection.
Well, okay, since you said that, I gotta, now you're making me think of something that Paul Mooney says. And I think we should, wrap it up on this and pick up part 2
next Friday.
Next Friday, if we can get assemble all of us. Just remember this: they have the complexion for the protection of the collection. I'll say it one more time. The EWMs have the complexion for the protection of the collection. And you look across our culture, and I'm just asking people to look at the culture. Don't look at what they do, because the culture will tell you what people do around here. And if you look at the culture, you'll see that the EWMs have the complexion for the protection of the collection. How about that, Michael George?
I agree. I agree 100%.
You can thank Paul Mooney for that wonderful black American scholar.
And he's a very funny. If you've never had a chance to see Paul Mooney in concert, I recommend.
Well, just go to YouTube. Forget about that. Go to YouTube and get a load of some of the shit that he's talking. He's like, I said, he's the one that came up with that. When he said that, I said, wow, that's exactly what they have. They, that's how they judge everything around here. They go, let me see, what kind of complexion does he have? Oh, well, he can't protect the collection. We don't need him. And everybody that they have in position that runs everything, they all fit into that category, and nobody says nothing.
Well, Doug, we're wrapping it up, and
Okay.
I would just bring the viewers and Michael George
I love what the people.
Another mention about who we started with this afternoon, and that was Marcus Garvey and Dr. Ben
That's right.
and John Henry Clark. And I submit to everyone, including Michael George, that those persons, those men, have no shrift with the arguments that were made today about white privilege, white power or anything else. They were warriors intent upon improving the condition of African American citizens. And that has been, that spirit has been brought down much more than people think. And we're going to see it in my granddaughter, in your grandchildren, and starting this September or this November, we saw it start in the House of Representatives, the Congress of this country.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up with this week's podcast event and the live stream over our 21 different sites, websites. That's 21 websites, Michael George, that we have. I'll send you a list of all of them that we have that promote this sort of a free speech. I want to say, give a big thank you to our executive producer, co-executive producer, Mr. Stu A. Reed, who's in here. He didn't comment today. I don't know why. But
couldn't get a word in.
Yeah, I couldn't check anybody up here. Couldn't get it. And of course, from the West Coast, Los Angeles, California, my main man, Miguel Jorge Michael George, who, when he used to call my house when he worked for the Post, my young children at the time used to always go, "Dad, it's Michael Jordan." I'm going, "No, it's Michael George." They always thought he was Michael Jordan. And of course...
Did Mike ever play basketball?
Yes,
I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding.
We were teammates. Yes, he did. Yes, he did play. And so, Mike, we're going to try to reconnoiter. This will be up on our YouTube channel for those of you who want to watch it in the whole entirety, including the first one, which we did in honor of Zach and C. Husser, who passed away, and we all said to ourselves, why did he do that? He was one of those kind of guys. And so we spent a lot of time talking about it with Mike. So maybe, Mike, we could get up on some of those stories and that we and jokes that we played on him doing the other show. And I just wanted to mention another thing about Ben, Dr. Ben. I want to, we can find the tape. Zach had got Dr. Ben to come on the show because Zach had taken to being Dr. Ben's chauffeur. One of Zach's MOs, Michael George, was that he would go into Rochester mode and he would drive people around. He was very insidious with that. And he was...
He was the Green Book before it was a movie.
Yes, that's right. Yes, he was. And I didn't see that movie. I guess it must be good. But I'll tell you another good movie that I saw, Michael George, since you brought that up, is The Hate That You Give with... there's a movie called The Hate That You Give, which is about police brutality in the Me Too. A real tearjerker. I would recommend that people see that. And one last thing, we're going to be coming up with a premium that we're going to be offering people who donate to the our projects and the things we're doing. We're going to offer them 2 of our streaming devices that will allow them to pick up a whole lot of crap and see some of the shenanigans that we're doing live and in Technicolor. And so with that, I turn it over to the professor.
You've been watching the Urban Reality Special, brought every Friday to you by the community reps, those who actually live, work, and aspire to being great in the Harlem and New York City community. And I'd like to thank Mike for calling in from the West Coast. It brought back some good old memories, some good old arguments, but some good old memories. But more importantly, I hope that what has been heard will be of use to the people we try to serve. That is, the residents, the voters, the citizens of New York City.
And the
Goodbye
world.
until next week.
And remember, if you tune in,
You may just learn something.
Miguel, thanks, Mike.
All righty. Take care now.